Hi, good morning, and thanks for joining us for this webinar today, which is going to start in a couple of minutes. We're just going to give a few of the late attendees to join. A little bit of housekeeping whilst we're waiting for that. This session is being recorded, but none of the personal data or none of the webcams or anything have been recorded. And the recording will be made available for you probably at the end of this week when it's all put together, so you receive a follow-up email on that. For any questions, if you put them through to the chat, it will be monitored and we'll pick up those questions at the end if we don't cover them during the actual webinar themselves. We'll kick off in just a couple of minutes. Okay, we've got a few more people joined in there now, so we'll start kicking on. So firstly, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is John Ward. I'm the Commercial Director for Tobii Pro across EMEA. Also look after the UK office as well. And just pop up a slide here. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and also my co-speaker today, which is Jennifer Hoyce. And as you can see on here, Jennifer's given me some tricky words to say early in the morning. So she's a practicing anthropologist, 12 years worth of experience, done thousands of different studies over the years. And we've worked together now for a couple of years, and she's also worked with our US office. So first of all, hello, Jennifer. Thank you for making the time for us today. Do you want to add a little bit about yourself as well and what you've been up to in the past couple of years, just to add to that for me?
Yeah, sure. So originally I'm from Texas in the US, and I started my career out there. I moved to Geneva, Switzerland, where I've been, really focusing more on running global projects for about the past 5 years. Shopper Insights is definitely my passion and expertise, probably more than anything else. So exciting to be able to come and to present this with you, John, and talk a little bit about the stuff I love to do.
Fantastic. No, it's great to share your insights. I'm sure everyone will be really interested to hear what you say. And obviously, we've got some examples about sort of making it real, getting those insights out to customers from different projects. So I'm hoping that everybody will take away something from here. So if we kind of maybe start with an introduction, then, if we look back at the first eye tracking project I did, which was 12, 13 years ago now, something like that, I was looking at children playing a game called Moshi Monsters online, which is an educational stroke freemium game. What was your first foray into eye tracking, and how did that come around?
Well, I think mine was probably about 8 years ago, and it was for a manufacturer of trash bags. Actually, yes. And so the idea of the eye tracking in that case was to understand in the aisle at a big box store how shoppers were relating to the information that's available on the packaging to navigate what needed to go on the front of the packaging. So we used eye tracking for that.
There you go. Probably not so many people think so much research goes into where you put trash bags, right? But it's nice to know that you've changed and diversified slightly. So you do quite a lot of work with boutiques and cosmetic brands and sort of high end there. So I think today what we want to talk about is sort of attraction, engagement, and then ultimately conversion, right, within retail. That's what it's all about, is selling products and engaging the customers. So maybe we can start by, just thinking about what a typical project looks like for you. And I think you put a slide together with some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so a few kind of example objectives that I hear, launching a new store and assessing the impact of a new store design. How well is this new store doing? If maybe the first time this brand has appeared in that market, and so how is it expressing itself to people as they encounter the store? What kind of experience is it delivering? Some A/B tests. Sometimes we'll have sales data and be tracking sales data, but we want to know what's really driving the performative differences, like what aspects of the display or the store or the shelf set are really causing the differences we're seeing in that test, and trying to pinpoint what it's doing the most. And then maximizing the productivity of the store. How can we take this store and help it perform better, simply? And all of these tend to have this kind of attraction, like how do you help people notice you? What are you saying? To engagement when they're inside and with us. What kind of experience are we offering? And then all of those kinds of factors sort of ladder up to the conversion side, right? In terms of study design, I kind of laid out some sort of sample plans. Of course, all of this depends on where and how many and what the deal is, but usually we have about 5 different methods that we're putting into this. Understanding behavioral sorts of aspects. What are people doing? You know, this is traffic analysis, behavioral observations, and then we're talking to shoppers, right? Understanding what they think, how they're making sense of this, what they're picking up on, and how they're interpreting that, which is coming out of qualitative and more structured approaches. And then, of course, eye tracking, right?
Yeah, so you work with like a mixed methodology approach. Eye tracking is a component in there to add some up. So, I mean, we've worked together on well, you worked with my team on a number of projects. How have you found that collaboration's worked, and kind of how did we help you get the projects over the line?
Yeah, well, I think that it's obviously it's been great because, you know, I'm able to really bring the team into the situation and the things that people are really concerned about, the stakeholders' interest in terms of how certain things might be doing and that kind of thing, really being able to align with you guys on how we should compartmentalize kind of complicated displays. In terms of engaging them about this methodology and helping to show the value, I would say it's really in examples and being able to show how it's going to bring to life what people are doing and how people are visually engaging. But also it's bringing to the table the subconscious sorts of behaviors as well as conscious, right? But it's the kinds of things that you can't really ask people. You can ask all day, what did you notice, and list off things and you can get a response. But eye tracking really helps us understand the kinds of behaviors that people might not even be aware that they're having at the moment.
Okay, so in this hypothetical brief that we're kind of working with right now, your client is sort of interested in the journey of the customer from the approach to the store to interacting with the window displays to the in-store experience and hopefully checking out with a basket full of goods, right? I mean, that's the end game. So on the next slide, you're sort of talking about where you start breaking this down and that attraction is the biggest challenge initially.
Exactly. Yeah, we start with what's going on from the outside of the store, looking at first of all, assessing the kind of traffic that's passing by, where most of the traffic is coming from, how the store is oriented, what are people doing as they pass the store. We try to look at the competitive context as well. I mean, oftentimes if we're in a mall or in high streets, there are going to be other brands that we're competing against right around the area. So we're looking at what's happening outside of our store, really what's our storefront doing, right? And then what's happening outside of other stores that are our competitors and how are we doing compared to them? This kind of sets the framework up and then gives us something to focus on a bit more as we're exploring. It's at this point that we start to realize oftentimes in any case, attraction is always the biggest challenge because you want to get people to come in, right? Anytime you can increase the number of people who actually enter the store, then kind of falls out from there, your numbers are going to go up in terms of sales and everything else.
So what you're doing here is you're actually observing people. So we're not eye tracking right at the moment. We're actually watching people. You sort of stood there from a distance, observing who actually sort of looks through and looks into the store and then obviously enters the store, which sort of gives you a first level of performance from there. So then if we jump on to the next slide, then you're saying that around 1 in 10 or more than 1 in 10 people glanced at the window but didn't stop. So the storefront has an opportunity to convert the passerby. So then kind of what's next from that point?
Yeah, so a couple of things there. We want to understand and kind of talk to those people, right? So impromptu interviews with folks that notice us but then keep walking by to understand, well, what did you notice anyways? What was it that caught your eye? What did that tell you anyways? What's the store about? And this is where we start picking up on things like category confusion. You know, I thought this was a fragrance shop and it's actually a skincare shop, this sort of thing. Also in the eye tracking journey, this is going to enter the equation at this point too, because we're going to recruit people to come and actually go to this store, passing by these competitor stores along the way. And that's where we get the chance to see what exactly their eyes naturally sort of go to as they're walking up to our store, which aspects of the window design are capturing their attention.
Yeah. So this is sort of intercept, stopping people as they're entering into the store to sort of give you some, again, some more of that background. And that will then feed into what you're looking for within the eye tracking study, or what you're looking from the eye tracking behaviors as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, totally.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so I mean, we already touched on it. I always recommend eye tracking as part of a wider toolbox, as you should with any research tool or methodology. Unfortunately, there's no one tool fits all. That would be great if there was. So if we go on to the next slide, we sort of go into a little bit more detail about what you had on those other elements. So these are the other things here that you might tie in with eye tracking as part of a bigger piece. So just talk me through this a little bit.
Sure. So this is specifically once people have actually gone into the store, understanding that experience inside. And so while on the outside of the store, we're doing more behavioral, a little bit of interviewing, and then eye tracking journey is starting outside. Once we go inside, at this point, we're wanting to observe shoppers all the way from, or it's kind of tracking them really, from the moment they enter until they leave. At that point, we'll talk to them about their experience. Sometimes we'll have a face coding element as well around specific displays or areas of interest. Also qualitative shop-alongs that are sort of separate from the eye tracking, and sometimes they're combined into one piece. We can do it either way to understand more about that journey as it's unfolding and what people are seeing at each moment. So we're basically triangulating all of these different things. So quantitative data, qualitative data, eye tracking data, which is part of the qualitative data in that sense. Obviously, it's not a large sample.
Yeah, and then this is sort of giving you a funnel from footfall traffic to people that engage to people that go into people that convert. And I think one of the things that's quite interesting with what you do is you actually give people, I was going to say real money, but you give them money to go and buy something, and they can actually come out with a purchase. So it's not a theoretical shopper mission. So they actually go away and they take that product away, right, as part of their incentive being part of it. So they'll buy something that they want to keep rather than just buying a tin of baked beans because you kind of told them to. So when you recruit people for the study and they sort of come and they see the glasses for the first time, what's the sort of reaction?
Well, I think that people might expect that it's maybe more than it is. Over time, I've noticed that the glasses have evolved to be much less cumbersome. And so today's glasses are not a big deal. I mean, of course, since we're meeting up with people really far kind of out of the store and away from everything, when we put them on, they want to see a mirror right away because we're going to make them go completely by themselves to do all of this, right? We don't want to be interfering in any way and just kind of let them do their thing. So their first concern is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to walk into this high-end store and people are going to think I look crazy. But, when they see a mirror, they're like, okay, yeah, it's like glasses, they're a little funky, but, it's okay. And I mean, in the stores, especially when there's a high level of customer service, those guys are trained to make anybody feel very comfortable, and they know this is what we're doing. So they're very welcoming and normal. That puts people at ease, and then they go on and do what they want to do. Sometimes people will forget about it to the extent that they want to apply products, and then we have to kind of watch and make sure that they don't mess with them. And we try to tell them that just, you can put anything on your face, just don't touch the glasses and move them. So that to me is kind of a good indicator that's not that big of a deal whenever somebody is actually like, oh, okay, I'm so into this product, I'm so into the moment that I'm like, okay, I'd like to forget about this and try to get under here and do something with my eye or something like that.
I think one of the other things that just picking up is, we've done some projects with your team over in the States, and you quite often start people almost like a city block away as well. So they get the full approach of the store as opposed to just being started at the entrance. Do you feel that you get better results from that and you get a more natural approach of the actual store and the reveal?
Yeah, I do. Well, I also want to look at how people are visually navigating in that context. On the way, we get a sense of that, right? So if you're in a mall and you're looking out for a store, we're seeing a planned trip, essentially. This person knows they're going to a specific place, and we get to look at how their head is turning, what that kind of cadence is as they're moving about, but also we get a sense of sight lines. And so this is where it can really matter if your brand doesn't have backlighting and your logo is very diminished, but everyone else's does. And we see people looking and making contact with those backlit signs, for example. Or if we see sight lines are much lower, and yet, you know, what you've got, all of your action is happening above that. So being able to understand just behaviorally what people are doing can help us interpret how they're responding to the store that we're interested in.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Okay, so we've got a little video clip just to show for those that haven't seen it, the eye tracking data as we would see it from the glasses here. So what sort of things should we be looking at? This is a cosmetic store in the UK here.
Yeah, well, this is going to show you exactly just a sample of somebody approaching a store, and I hope that you can see from this. Start thinking about, well, where are you seeing their eyes hit? Where on the storefront did their eyes seem to be attracted? And what are we seeing happening here? So notice looking at storefront elements versus looking through the store, these kinds of behaviors.
Great, okay. Well, let's play the video now and see where this goes. It's about 20 seconds long, so it's only a short one. I think this is quite interesting because obviously it's a very open store with not too much in the window display, but you instantly see the person checking out the window displays, but then they're then inside the store with their eyes, right? They're actually looking at the back displays and sort of fed in, welcome in. It's also sometimes surprising for people when you see how quickly your eyes move. When people haven't seen eye tracking data before, it's sometimes a little bit surprising for them, the amount of things that we interact with and the amount of things that we make decisions with so quickly in terms of the data.
Exactly.
So if we go to the sort of the first part, we've observed the store, you've kind of looked at the conversion rates, we've had the participant wearing the glasses and completing the journey. So the big thing now is really to sort of talk about now what, right? This is it. So we've broken this into two. So the first one, we just got the title on this is attraction, and then we're sort of going to go into engagement. So how do we get that data from the eye tracker and then put it into some insights or findings that the customer can actually take away and work on? And obviously, you know, you split this down into two parts, attraction, engagement. So the first example on the next slide is we're talking about things like first impressions.
Yes, so as soon as we've kind of handled the window at this point, like you're saying, and now the next critical juncture to me is as soon as they walk in the door, what happens? So I want to stop time. We've just entered the store. And so I like to look at the first 5 seconds, 10 seconds in the eye tracking aspect of where are their eyes going. And what I'm looking at here is to see whether or not this store has an impact zone, which is a clear focal point, a place where I would see most everyone's eyes going first. The reason this is important is this is really the retailer leading the dance in the journey to the store. It's helping a person, in a sense, navigate, know how to start, take a clear message about the brand. It's an opportunity to say something to the shopper about what we have to offer. So in this example, you see attention going all over the place, right? Everybody's looking at something different. What we might hear in this context when we talk to shoppers in the other methods, oh, hang on a minute, you know, let's say we're in the shop along. What do you notice right now? Let's just pause. Tell me what you see. Then I can hear things like, oh, this looks like any store, right? Not much going on. It's a little intimidating. It's how I feel. Also, you can have a brand that is really big in people's minds through social media. They're seeing all sorts of cool new stuff coming out, but when they get to the store, it's not clear, where is this stuff, you know?
So what we're showing here is like just the first 5 seconds of a sample of about 5 or 6 people, isn't it? So there's no cohesion there between where the first point of entry is. There's no real reason to enter the store. It's kind of bland and it's a bit beige. It's a bit sort of cold and it's just a bit plain. And like you say, there's no sort of footprint in there, but also like the lighting doesn't guide you in. It's quite bright and stark, and yeah, it's just not very engaging at all. Okay, so the next slide that we've got here is sort of where we've got slightly different sort of activations and so on. But here we've got challenges with things like the brand not being seen and noticed, right?
Yeah, so in this case, we do see that this front table is working to be an impact zone. Everybody's going and looking here first, and they're specifically tuning into these candles, right? Well, we have an impact zone. What's the impact zone telling us? How is it helping our shoppers connect with our brand, our products? What makes us great? So we start to hear category confusion coming out in this case, actually, because they're noticing the candles and at a glance are thinking if they don't use this brand, right? They don't know the brand, then, oh, it's a fragrance store. I see candles. And then they may be in real life, just look at the candles and walk on because they're not really interested in candles that day. So in this case, the eye tracking is helping us understand where this attention is going. It's also helping us understand where it's not going, right? To the brand logos, not in sight lines really. And if you're standing there, you can really see how this works. The wide angle kind of orients things out a bit. The products to the right, not getting much attention either. So yeah, while we have an impact zone, that impact zone's not working to help our brand tell shoppers who they are and why they're special.
And at this point, it's not going to be, if you think it's candles when it should be fragrance, you're not going to stop if you're looking for fragrance, right? I mean,
Right.
It's pretty obvious from here. This is, again, the sort of first 5 seconds. So if people are sort of wandering around or walking past this and glance over, you know, the branding isn't being seen. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 places where the brand is actually mentioned. The eye tracking makes it very obvious that it isn't seen when people are glancing across, but how difficult is that sometimes for your stakeholders to actually accept if you don't have this type of evidence?
Yeah, I mean, it's not too easy actually. I mean, I can say, look, people think it's home fragrances. We suppose that it's because there's candles there. In this case, I think that's kind of clear cut. But I think that you can say a lot of different data on a slide, a lot of numbers and stats and charts and whatnot, but to be able, especially for creative types that are more maybe visually oriented, being able to show something like this helps them understand, oh, everybody's looking at the candles. Okay, interesting. Oh, we made this beautiful designs in the back. Why are they not looking? Well, maybe it's because that's all in the background. And so attention's coming up front first. Let's bring some of that up onto this table to help engage shoppers.
Yeah, and I suppose with some of the customers you have, they have a vision for how they want the brand, but if some of these are concessions or secondary locations not in their own store, they maybe have slightly less control about placement and approach lines and sight lines as well, right? So it's even more important. Okay, so next slide that we've got on here is talking about sort of noticeability, and this is quite a busy store in terms of there's an awful lot going on there. But talk us through what you've seen from this one.
Yeah, so in this case, we see similar to the last where these greeter tables functioning as our impact zone. We see attention, of course, we have the sanitizer, right? Everybody's going to tune into that versus they're supposed to sanitize their hands. It is good that we see attention going here. That makes sense from the layout perspective, and then to that table that's highlighting a new product on the back. And so what we can say in this case, the store is outperforming in terms of turning heads and bringing people inside. Why? And it's good to be able to pinpoint that for people. Well, you have these greeter displays. People are picking up on newness. That's because you've got newness in the front where people are tuning in to these products first. So you're communicating. These displays are functionally doing what you're wanting them to do. The target consumer in this case is younger. They're hoping to bring in a much younger age group, and those guys were more concerned about sustainability. So they're losing some of these guys by visually reinforcing our plastic packaging and some other kinds of cues that are happening there as well. And so the key point, I think, is first of all, do we have an impact zone? And eye tracking is helping us establish that. And then understanding what is that impact zone doing? Just having one isn't necessarily enough, but it's certainly important to know.
Okay, so, you know, attraction is obviously hugely important because if you don't attract them, you're not going to engage them. If you don't engage them, you can't convert them, right? So, you know, looking at some of the examples there, there's some sort of easy sort of things to sort of pick out and see. Obviously, for me, this looks quite cluttered, but it's also, there's a lot to go at, right, as well. There's a lot sort of to work with, but it's high contrast, high saliency. There's lots of different shapes there that are attractive, things like the bows and everything like that on the boxes. So there's something for everything. But it's also maybe in danger of maybe going a little bit too far and having too much. There's a fine line between cluttered and minimalist in terms of grabbing their attention, right? So, yeah. But let's assume they've walked past, they've looked into our window and so on, and it looks great. Then we start talking about engagement.
Yep.
So
at this point,
yeah, attraction is obviously key to getting somebody to stop in their tracks and feel they want to do that. But When we start talking about going in and looking at store, what is the typical thing that you would normally be testing when you're looking at engagement?
Well, we want to understand what people are doing in the store. So if we want to flip to the next slide, we can see a little bit about that. Um, I like to observe a set of shoppers from the time they walk in all the way through the journey, however long that may be, and get a firm understanding of the differences that we see in how people are engaging, how long they're spending with us, when different things are happening. And then, of course, how this may break out between buyers versus browsers, maybe older shoppers versus younger shoppers, whatever we may be looking at. Now we're looking after they've entered. So we've talked about that first 5 seconds of looking attention. This heat map is showing the full journey. So at a glance, we can see also where sight lines are along this journey, right? They're more eye level, a bit below, not too high up. Then we get a sense, of course, of what are the major behaviors that are happening here.
It's just one of the interesting. I mean, you've got one of these categories that, with the post-COVID sort of environment, things like trying on cosmetics and fragrances, people are going to have to innovate in the way that you can still smell them, because it's obviously a very sensory sort of purchase, right? Have you any thoughts whether how that's going to change? I'm putting you on the spot here now to fix the future of perfume retail. But
No, I know. I think I do have a lot of thoughts about it. One thing I think is things are moving more towards delivering an experience increasingly. So there might be a real renaissance in retail towards creating more experiential places for people to be and experience products. But also facilitating that experience is going to have to be a bit more self-guided, perhaps. And of course, some of the newer, more agile brands I know are ordering massive amounts of individual samples. So moving away from one person, lipstick going to another person, even with sanitation. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds.
Great. Okay, if we jump on to the next slide. Then here we start talking about sort of the navigation cues that look great on paper, but maybe aren't working out in reality. So do you want to talk us through what should be seen here and what isn't being seen?
Yes, exactly. So in this case, we've already looked at the point of approach in the same store. And so now we're looking at the individual displays. And this is just one example. The team had curated this display such that the kits on the bottom corresponded to the products above. And so the kits are signaling from below what's above, and then the navigational headers above are signaling what's below. So what we can hear from the data is that our new to the brand shoppers really aren't picking up on this. They're not seeing what the differences are, that these are categorically distinct in a vertical merchandising way, that each product adjacent to each other product is totally a different kind of product. It's not just scent. So we're picking up on that. We're picking up on the idea that shoppers didn't realize that the products above related to the kits below. So we can hear that, and then from the eye tracking data, then we start to see how people are visually navigating in terms of what they're noticing and not noticing. So we can see right away that the navigational signs at the top are completely tuned out. They're missed. They're too high. We know from the full store shopping that sight lines are lower. Those larger products driving sight lines lower, as well as the proximity to the shopper on the display. So this heat map can illustrate that. In a minute, I know we'll talk a bit about the gaze plots, which can help us understand the flow.
Yeah, I think the other thing here, there's no sort of block branding or segmentation right between them there. There's, you can almost rotate the signage down and use those as the dividers to sort of segment that down. But it feels like a little bit too much in too small a space with not enough sort of thought on that. Eye tracking data is like very visual by its nature, right? I mean, it is what it says it is. It's looking through the eyes of the consumer or the user. How do you think that helps when you're sort of selling your insights and you're delivering the findings? How does the visual nature of eye tracking outputs help get that across to the stakeholder?
Yes, well, actually, for a study like this, I would also ask people, did you happen to notice the navigational signs? And I can get data back like that, but it's usually a bit inflated, where people will say, oh yeah, I noticed And I can see relatively fewer noticing these signs relative to other elements I can ask about. But the thing that really can help is a visual example to say, okay, let's look at how people are visually shopping this display. So what we see is attention going to the bottom shelf. Now, I could put numbers all along each of these shelves and say, this is the percentage that noticed this shelf or that shelf. You know, you can't ask about everything as well. But in this case, you know, it makes it pretty clear visually. A picture obviously communicates things much faster.
Okay, great. So we've done a few heat maps. There's video there. We're on to the next slide. We're actually sort of showing a couple of gaze plots here. And gaze plots are, in my opinion, something that's probably underused a little bit when we're looking at eye tracking data. Because if you have a lot of people's gaze plots here, this is basically a journey. This is a search through there with the size of the dot representing the dwell time. The bigger the dot, the longer the dwell time. And obviously we're numbered here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this gives us the sequence and the viewing order that we actually have through here. But where I would often use a gaze plot is very similar to what we have here. This is a typical or non-typical behavior, depending on what we're trying to illustrate, of one person looking through a display or something similar. So we've got a quite cluttered perfume display, but probably again typical, and then a more sort of spacious Dyson display. So what are we seeing here in these two gaze plots, and are these working or not working?
Yeah, so on the left, this one's not working, and on the right, that one's working. And why I say that is in both cases, we'll see that, and you can see the small numbers there, the attention is going to the products first. Okay, that makes sense. That's what we normally see. But where things are different is on the left, you'll see the information about the product is actually kind of behind the visual, behind the vase. There's a text card that explains the ingredients and the notes in this fragrance. On the display on the right, the information is in front of the products, closer to the shopper. So on the right, we see it working like attention to the products, attention to the information in front, and then if they make it to that takeaway card in the back, great. On the left, where it's not working so well, we see attention to the products, and then maybe they look up to the front card because it's closer to them, glance at the photograph, and then a lot of folks don't make it back to that information card. And in this gaze plot, you can see that's last in the journey on this shopper's gaze plot. So this kind of analysis is really, I would say, plays a super critical role in helping you understand what's wrong here and why is something not working. So I can understand that people don't get the benefits of the perfume on the left, and I can understand that people seem to be really confident in how to use those products on the right. Why? And so understanding that visual journey through the gaze plots can help me with the team explaining this. Okay, it's behind here, and we know based on how people visually browse displays like this and doing this many years, right, that putting the information further back is going to make that information not so well noticed. You need to bring it forward, in front, or adjacent. So now we can start optimizing the display just in terms of the layout. We're not telling anyone to go back to the drawing board and create all new stuff, but rather let's just work on moving things around a bit to help establish those connections.
Yeah, and I think there's also two trains of thought here, that sometimes, you know, you will get it that I don't care when they see it as long as they see it, which is great. But when you're designing something like a product display or a journey or, you know, a sequence or a range of products, there is a defined path that you want people to follow. And a heat map doesn't necessarily always give you that sort of understanding. It will give you somebody looked at it at some point, where the gaze plot gives you the granularity. So, you know, I usually use them in conjunction with each other. So this is what people did, and then this is the overall view. And I think if we go, we've got heat maps of the other two, and you've kind of summarized the overall journey across the aggregated people, right? So this is a single journey. If we go to the next slide with the first heat map, which is the perfume.
Yeah.
You've sort of broken this down into first thing seen, second thing seen, and third thing seen.
Exactly. Yes. And so the heat map quickly shows you attention's going to the products. If there were disputes, you know, amongst the team in terms of how these different elements were playing out, we can say, look, everybody's noticing your product. Great. That's good. We're driving attention to the product. But you can see also right off the bat that where the second point of attention, the second place people are noticing, that's not really something that's going to help them know the product. This is assuming they want to try the product. We're already at that point. The thing that might persuade them to try the product is out of sight lines. It's too far back. So just a simple 1, 2, 3, whenever we look at this in aggregate, can be impactful in helping to interpret and explain the more quantitative data, the perceptions and the way that people are receiving this.
Sure. Just conscious of time here. We'll just look at the Dyson one quickly and then we'll jump on to any questions. So again, you can see how this one sort of shows that sort of list of attention. And, you know, the takeaway, I mean, the takeaway items at the back aren't really getting much attention at all, but you would think that most people have, well, understood the product, they've referred to the literature, they kind of know what each of those 3 things is doing there. And you can see there from the sort of the quantitative feedback that you've taken, or the sort of qualitative feedback you've taken, that pretty much everybody understands what this is about, which isn't what they were getting with the fragrance notes on the perfume.
Exactly.
Great. Well, just again, to wrap things up, I think when we said that we were going to do this webinar and we were talking about the content, I asked you to put into one sentence what was unique about eye tracking and what unique insights, and you came up with this answer, which is 2 sentences, but it's great, still love it. Eye tracking offers visually engaging evidence of conscious and subconscious looking behavior. It's a critical behavior you can't observe or capture otherwise. And I think, you know, that's a really good statement. I think it's, you know, something that obviously I stand by, and I say I've been doing this for 12 years and I still learn new things about behavior sort of with every project we do. Jennifer, I want to thank you for your insights and your examples. I'm sure the audience will have enjoyed hearing that and seeing that. So what we'll now do is open up any questions that are in the chat there. I'm just looking across the little chat message to see what pops up. Okay, so first one that we've got is, with your experience, do you have any top tips for having a successful eye tracking project?
I would say oftentimes whenever our clients ask us to use eye tracking, if it goes in that direction and it's not your recommendation, the focus on what it can do, or the idea of what it can actually do for us, may be much more narrow than what it can do. And so considering the event that you're studying and breaking it down into meaningful components where you could change action or change behavior to increase the performance, and then working with the eye tracking team to create those junctures. So in these examples, the outside of the store, window attraction, impact zone inside the store, and then journey through the store. So creating meaningful segments and broadening what eye tracking is bringing to the table on the project, because it can do oftentimes more than what we set out to do with it.
Okay, great. Got another question here. It doesn't scroll down very well on the chat thing. So you talked about look at the beginning, but I think it's very generic. What metrics did you use and what interpretation? Can't see the other part of that column. What interpretation did? I can't see the last bit of that there. See if we can get the window up here. Okay. So look at the beginning and which metrics you use. Here we go. Total fixation duration can be interesting, but also difficult to understand. So I think, you know, when we start talking about metrics and so on, I mean, we have within our software, we have 17 different metrics, or 14, depending on whether you're looking at screen-based or glasses-based. And I think it all depends on what you're actually trying to look at. Normally, I would recommend that you'd use 2 or 3 metrics. If you are going to use metrics at all, if it's a smaller qualitative sample, you'd be doing obviously more observational based analysis. So for example, if we're looking at something that stand out, it might be time to first fixation, percentage of people that fixated, and then also maybe the first fixation duration. That way you're sort of saying, how easy was it to find it? How many people saw it? And were they engaged with it the first time that they saw it? If we're talking about, you know, attraction in a sort of a bigger context in terms of maybe within a store, then you might actually be looking at maybe less so about total fixation duration, but maybe total visit duration, which is all the eye movements or all the visual attention within there. But, you know, I think if we went on to metrics, I can have a whole other webinar for several hours about the different metrics that we want to use there. So, you know, I was going to say, I hope that answers the question to some extent, but, you know, I'll be happy to have that conversation if everyone wants to have a chat online, because it can be a much bigger conversation than a few seconds.
Yeah, and while you'll see a heat map and an interpretation in this case, certainly I wouldn't think, oh, here the heat map shows everyone looks at the table. The table's a winner. You know, not only does it matter what the table's doing, but we would look at, in some cases, you'll see people tuning into something first because of its placement or proximity, but then quickly looking away and realizing there's something that's not really engaging about this. While everybody's looking here first, it's not captivating people to the extent that their gaze lingers, that they're coming forth really reading and meaningfully engaging. So that would probably be more my interpretation of the science John is talking about.
Okay, there we go. It's starting to, the questions starting to come through properly now, which is good. Can you please explain what the numbers, the meaning of the numbers are in terms of the gaze plots, number of gaze on that point, or the order of the gazes the user's done? So within a gaze plot, the number is the sequence. So the number 1 is the first fixation, number 2 is the second fixation, 3, 4, and so on. So that way you know the exact viewing order. And as I said, the size of the dot, or the size of that there, is the length of the dwell time, so the length of the fixation. So you can see, for example, if we look here, if we look at the perfume bottle, we can see that they sort of start at the bottom of the right-hand bottle, then they check out. You can see they're checking out the cap, the brand, the logo, and they go back to it. And what you'd be looking for with things like this is, for example, yes, the sequence, maybe whether they use the reference materials to go through here, but also when you come to the decision-making process, if you see, for example, 5 and then 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10 as people are looking between 2 different products, then you can see there that there's a consideration going on and they're actually trying to determine which product is maybe the one they go for. So you could argue that, well, that's great because they're going to buy one of them, but if you're brand A and you're being compared to brand B, you want to know why you're still in that consideration and you're not being looked at and engaged and sort of taken off the shelf. And a gaze plot will show that detail, whereas a heat map won't, because a heat map's just the aggregate. So you'll know that they looked at both, but you don't know that that was sort of flip-flopping between the two different things there. Okay, let's have a quick look here. Hi, from the Dyson perfume example, what's the key takeaway? If I understand correctly, special placement cannot be cluttered to drive attractions conversion. Product benefits need to be communicated in front of the product itself. Is it something viable for electronics products since consumers seek for more product info? Thanks. Okay, so I think, yeah, I'll start on this one and I'll throw it over to Jennifer. I think, in the 2 examples that we've got here, they are different sort of categories for one, which you sort of pick up on there. And obviously a more technical product might have more sort of product information, or people might be interested in more compatibility and specifications and so on. But I think it's all about what you are trying to get across as the key pieces of information for to make a purchase, right, or to engage with the brand. And in the fragrance example here, and Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, but the information that's at the front is not sort of relevant in terms of selling the product. The information at the back is the tones, the notes, the scents, actual sort of DNA and build up. And that's not really in a position, especially because of sight lines. Jennifer, I don't know if you're going to ask.
No, simply placement is important. I mean, it's just very common sense, right? Placement is important in terms of ensuring a link between product benefits and product. And usually, from what I can tell, I mean, these are kind of trying to be examples of this, but adjacencies or placement in front will work better than placement in back. You can't apply that across the board. Obviously, it depends, because oftentimes you'll find that in a store, there'll be patterns. You can train shoppers and repeat the same pattern or layout throughout. And if they pick up on it, then they will dutifully use that. But obviously, in the case on the left, the distance between the person and the card, not only is it disconnected from the products and kind of isolated with some visual barriers by way of the vase and the visual, but it's just not legible at that distance. And so there's obviously quite a bit that's not working there. And the Dyson, that example is chosen as exemplary in the sense that, we're seeing attention go up to the products. Actually, these being larger products helps drive attention from much further away. So you can have people tuning in from a distance and then coming up and then moving their eyes down, and now they're able to find out what about those products. And so that layout is creating a stronger relationship between product benefits and usage than the layout on the left, just due to proximity in this example.
Yeah, and I think if you also then look into maybe more of a FMCG and sort of maybe grocery category as well, when you have a lot of information on the shelf, maybe about, for example, health and nutritional values, but usually like the value proposition, especially when people are making comparisons between, you know, a 2 kilo and a 1.5 kilo product that might be on special offer, and we see a lot of that relationship there, and the clarity of that information is even more key there as we go forward. So there's no one set rule to where the information should be. It's kind of, you know, relevant to the category and the shopper journey. And, you know, you might be a little bit more like the Apple store, right? Where, you know, you just assume that everybody can use all your products and you don't put anything there at all. Or alternatively, you're trying to get your unique proposition across as well. So I think we've got one more question. How do you do the face coding, and do you combine this with the eye tracking data? So face coding is kind of something that can be done two ways. One is using a computer algorithm, which normally requires a nice forward-facing shot, like we've got a Jennifer on a webcam and some good lighting and you not to talk and this kind of thing. And the other one, and I suspect the way that Jennifer's doing it, is using a good old Mark I old-fashioned human being to sort of observe things. But Jennifer, how do you do your face coding in store, and how do you work that with the other data?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I've done it a few different ways, but you know, one of the, I thought, more interesting ways was to, we were very interested in maybe 5 or 6 different displays within a store. They were all new. And so we were able to say, okay, this is how people are visually engaging with the display. These are the impressions. And then we're also able to offer kind of an emotional scorecard and try to reveal the emotional resonance of the display. I mean, how it worked really was the specialist came in and lingered about these displays and observed and made notes, literally, as opposed to recording and doing it that way. We have done it that way as well, recording shoppers that were, you know, in agreement to being recorded and watching them come in and capturing their face as they're entering and shopping, and kind of going at it that way to try to understand some of the differences in the emotional resonance throughout the journey along a big aisle. So.
And you know, obviously there are other ways of measuring sort of engagement and so on. You've got things like galvanic skin response, which we can do. You can look at heart rate monitoring and all these other bits and pieces there. I think one of the things with any of these other techniques and technologies is, you know, if you are going to buy some, you know, jar of mayonnaise and some baked beans, it's very unlikely you're going to get a high emotional engagement factor from that sort of purchase. If it's a boutique, a sensory, fragrance, you know, high ticket, high reward item like booking a holiday, then obviously you should start seeing those sort of reward elements there. So I said no more questions. There's one here, and you know, this one's what advice would you give to somebody who's just starting out using eye tracking? So I don't know, Jennifer, if you got one piece of advice, and then and I'll give one.
I'd go to the context wherever it is, go there early, stand there, watch what's happening, and design with that in mind. So in terms of where you're going to send, make sure you send the folks wearing eye tracking in from the direction that most people enter, or you'll be so super disappointed if you arbitrarily establish that. And then planning, map it out, identify and align on language, create compartments or zones, and align with the eye tracking team on all of that.
Yeah, and I would sort of echo it. I mean, my team here, and when we bring on new team members, you know, they get sick of me saying, always start at the end, and what is the question you're trying to answer, but also how are you going to measure whether that was successful or whether you met that objective and so on, and then work backwards from there to sort of create the methodology from that there. And you know, there's danger of having, you know, analysis paralysis and trying to use 20 different metrics and trying to overcomplicate things and so on. You know, typically if you are using metrics, we tend to say use 2 or 3, because otherwise you're looking for things that maybe aren't there. The other thing is that then you can start benchmarking. So if you do want to do ABs or look at evolution over time, you can do that. But my other thing would always be do a pilot. Always do a pilot. There's so many times when projects get run, there's no pilot, they get the data, and we find out that, you know, the methodology maybe could have been done slightly differently and so on. So always do a pilot, always think of the answer, think of what you're trying to answer and work backwards from there. So Great. So that brings us up a little bit over time, a few minutes over. Jennifer, I want to thank you again for a great session. I hope everyone got something from that. As I say, feel free to reach out to us via whatever channels. Jennifer, you can give a quick plug to your business that you just set up. So you want to just say who you are and what you're going to be doing?
Oh yes, so I'm creating a small agency here in Geneva to be able to continue doing what I love doing, which is projects like these anywhere. I'm working with some team in Madrid, a team in China, and a team in the US to kind of put our heads together for this. So yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. As I say, the video will be made available to people at the end of the week. And if you do want to reach out to any of the Tobii team, then you can feel free to do that. And thank you again for your attendance. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.